Panelists here are working with the ocean in one way or another. And so we'll have a good conversation about what the challenges are and also what the things we can do about it. Before I start into the introduction, I'll perhaps ask my panelists to introduce themselves so that you get to know who they are. Please tell us in a minute or two your name, what you're doing with the ocean, what it means to you, and we can pass the microphone along.
So happy to be here. My name is Ledama Masita, and I work with local communities in marine conservation initiatives. I create films and documentaries for our ocean, but I also support blue food systems. So that's me, and once again, such a pleasure to be here.
My name, Justus Taura, from Takaungu BMU. Work as a fish trader and a fisherman.
Hi everybody, my name is Esther Maina and I'm the coordinator for the Kenyan Youth Biodiversity Network. That coordinates for young people's engagement under the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. And we seek to advance policy and also advocacy as well as biodiversity conservation. We have our marine restoration project in Sambweni, and we also seek to address plastic pollution through citizen science. Thank you.
And my name is Lilian Mulupi. I am a marine conservationist. I work with local communities along the coast of Kenya to conserve the ocean in one way or another. Currently, the program I'm working on focuses on conservation of marine megafauna. These are the big animals in the ocean. Thank you.
So what we'll talk about, so building from the two sessions that we've already had here, the panels, we want to understand what we can do about the challenges facing us in this is an eco-festival in the environment and our relationship to the ocean. But perhaps first a small introduction to the ocean. I mean, the ocean is the biggest biome or the biggest ecosystem. So in the past, we thought it was too big to be harmed by human activities. But of course, now we know that it's not too big to be harmed. We're doing that now. But it's very important to stop that damage, to prevent it, because we depend on the ocean. We still do. There's some classic statistics you hear from the beginning of time. Plankton in the ocean have produced oxygen, which is in the atmosphere, and half of the oxygen, so every second breath that we take is dependent on the ocean. So even if you're living in the center of Kenya and Mount Kenya or by Lake Victoria, every second breath that every one of us takes has come from the ocean at one point. That way we learn to keep it close. We can bring it much closer to us here living on the coast, of course. I work on coral reefs, and I think many of our interactions of the panelists is with coral reefs. They're just fringing the coastline. They protect our coastline. They provide a lot of fish that support fishing communities. The biodiversity is very high. They support our tourism industries. So they're critically important, not only in their own right to conserve, but also for the benefits that we get in society from them. And we often think, again, well, what can I do? But every single person is an individual. We all have an impact. We all have choices, and we can choose to do things better each day than to do things worse. And so we'll come to that as we move through the discussion. So first, what I'd like to do is to start going through the panelists. And I'll start with Esther, if I may. You have a voice not just inside Kenya for marine conservation, but also internationally with the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. Let's start with the bigger picture from you. What are some of the key challenges being faced by our seas around the world and in relation to Kenya, and how urgent are they?
Thank you so much, David, for that question. And I think from where I sit, and one of the things that aligns with the panel that has just left the stage is that we are feeling overwhelmed by all these challenges. But in the context of these challenges is that there's the urgency for action. And looking at these challenges, we're not now talking about just challenges. There is the concept of the triple planetary crisis, talking about climate change, biodiversity loss, and also pollution. And looking at these challenges, they are really interconnected. And this is what drives the agency for our collective action to address these challenges. And one of the things that is worth noting is that a challenge doesn't start global. It starts local and then goes global. And looking at some of the impacts maybe that align with climate change, if we may say, is that we have had marine ecosystems getting altered by the impact of climate change, such as ocean acidification, rising sea temperatures. I love the fact that David has already talked about coral reefs. We have coral reefs providing a strong ecological framework for a quarter of the marine species in the world. And so it is not just coral reefs benefiting us as a nation, it is also benefiting other countries, because as we talk about the ocean, I would want to ask a question first. How many oceans do we have? How many oceans do we have?
How many oceans? I see 5 fingers, I see 1 finger, I see another 1.
Yes, so there has been that debate on the number of oceans that we have. And yes, we might think that they are 5, but one of the critical things to think about the ocean is that we have only one global ocean. So in terms of the impacts that are going to be felt, they are going to be moving from one area of the ocean to the other. And looking at how these challenges are interconnected, the only unique thing with these challenges is that they vary across regions. The previous panel mentioned about Africa being more vulnerable than other states, than other continents. And some of those things also align with how things are in Africa, because we have small island developing states, and we also have mainland coastal states. And looking at how impacts are manifested in small island developing states, it's a bit more compared to these other states, because small island developing states really rely on our ocean much more than our mainland coastal states, because we have our terrestrial ecosystems. But for islands, they only rely on the ocean. And also, given the fact that they are so remote, their geographical location also places them at a greater vulnerability. But also looking at the other issues that I mentioned to do with plastic pollution, we are seeing our species really getting impacted by plastic pollution, the entanglement of species, the ingestion of plastic by species. Some of these issues we used to see them on movies, but right now it gets really devastating to witness these impacts even on the ground. I love the fact that we are all here working closely with communities, and the evidence that comes with these communities is that the produce that comes from the ocean, and also their livelihoods are really getting impacted by the impacts of climate change. And so I feel first, why is it really urgent to address these issues? Our communities are suffering, and also the fact that at the global level, these conversations have been going on. We recently had the COP29, and I'm happy that there is going to be a panel that is going to have a take on COP29. We also have nations currently negotiating a plastics treaty that is going to seek to address issues of plastic pollution. And also recently we had the COP16 that is seeking to advance action on how to address the issues of biodiversity loss. And so as a country, I feel that we are not negated from these impacts, and we should do whatever it takes to make sure that we have a stake in addressing these challenges.
Okay, thank you, Esther. And I'd like to pick it up from what you said, from one ocean down to our community over here. And perhaps I'll turn to Justice next, because Justice represents the fishing community here in Takaungu. What is your perspective on the key challenges being faced in our seas, and how do they affect people over here? So please, Justice.
So thanks for that question. Sorry. Uh, I have something. The key challenges here in Takaungu, local fishes. Yeah, there's key challenges here in our seas. First one, overfishing. And second one, climate change effects. And third one, marine pollution, noises pollution from nearby industry. Example like industry like Mombasa cement. Yes.
No, thank you. And so you have brought what Esther said at the global level. She mentioned climate change, these global planetary crises, we call them, the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And you've brought it down to the ground over here. And overfishing is a big challenge, I think, for the communities because of the dependence on fisheries. What are some of the things, or how does it affect the community? How does overfishing affect the people that you work with or that you represent? How do you feel that how is your community affected by these changes? I think some of us have been working with fishing communities for many years. I think all of our organizations a bit. Do we want to hear from you? How does it make people feel? What do they do? If there's less fish in the sea? Or perhaps, Dami, you're working with a fishing community just down the coast. Maybe you can also speak to that with Justice.
Thank you very much. And as Justice, we laid the foundation of the more contextual issues that are faced, which are often on our front door, because solutions should be rooted in the context of the problem. And if it's not rooted in the context of the problem, then it's like papering over cracks. And the major issue with the challenges that our ocean faces, even so close to home, they are multifaceted. There is no one single owner, there's no one single driver, but also there are many different people and actors involved. So when it comes to being able to navigate some of these challenges, but also see exactly the extent of the impact, it can be tricky. But this often manifests in impact to livelihoods when it comes to be it household income with decline in the fishery. It impacts nutrition, looking at nutritional levels, because fish is a high protein source. It impacts health as well, because healthy seas, healthy meat, that's what I like to say. But also it impacts the future of the local economy as well.
Right, thank you. I think if anybody would like to come in on these same questions as we're talking, we want to have a conversation here, so you're very welcome to jump in as well. But perhaps I'll go to Lillian next. Is because you're working with an NGO that supports communities as well, very much like Kuruwitu and the Takaungu community also. How do you go about identifying what the challenges are, and then what some successful actions might be? Perhaps you can give us some examples from your work.
Thank you. So usually one of us talked about the problem being local, the challenges starting local and going global. And usually the best way to approach, or the best way to arrive to a solution, is start engaging the local communities. Because really, they're the ones who feel it, and they're the ones who might have good ideas about how a solution can be approached or arrived at. And so in our work, we engage the local institutions that have been set by law to represent local communities. And the beach management unit is one such institution. So up and down, along the coast of Kenya, we have beach management units we call them BMUs in short. And these are institutions that represent the local communities. And so usually that is the place where we start. We start with the BMUs, and and each BMU have got something that they're doing towards conservation. Sometimes it is working well, sometimes it's not. And as NGOs, we try to understand what the challenges are that they're working with and how they're solving them, and help them solve them in their own way, and also aligning to the government's legislation and policies.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to pick up on that and perhaps describe the beach management units a little bit. And then perhaps each of you could say something about what your beach management units are doing in your area. Now, for those who are not so familiar, these are the local fishing organizations or community organizations with the elders and the local leaders who are elected from the community. But the government has recognized the importance of these community groups and these organizations, and the fisheries department essentially devolves some responsibility for management of the fishery to these local organizations, because the government can't be present everywhere on the ground. And so it's a really great way of really finding a middle ground between what the government can do at a larger scale and what individuals or villages might do at a local scale, and sitting between those. So perhaps some projects from BMUs that are happening in your area. Who wants to say something about that?
So currently I'm working with a BMU out in Marereni. Marereni is about 60 kilometers north of Malindi, and they have a very expansive coastline that is a good nesting ground for sea turtles. And so because of the remoteness of the area, there isn't a lot of government presence on that beach, and makes it vulnerable to poachers. You have sometimes people who come to the beach to wait for a turtle to come up to nest, and it's killed. So the community there are working as community scouts, patrolling the beaches to ensure that the turtles that are coming up to nest are safe. So it is a lot of work, because usually turtles come up to nest at night, and it's a lot of sacrifice of the local communities. It's a lot of sacrifice on their part to ensure that they're doing this. And yeah, that is one of the examples that I would give. The same area also is very rich in marine mammals, but currently we don't have data. We don't have any statistics on where they are, how many they are. So this is another area where they're working towards establishing what are the areas that these animals come to and what are they coming to do, and forming some kind of protection in those areas so that they're able to conserve the environments that the marine mammals use.
Thank you.
So I'm very, very privileged to have walked the journey with Kuruwitu BMU, who spearheaded a really wonderful framework for collaborative management of fisheries. And they've got a 12,000 hectare area, and overfishing was quite an issue. So what this collaborative management area did is bring together every different stakeholder present in the Kuruwitu space and see how they can jointly manage their fishery, jointly manage their resources. And this extended into how can they conserve their ecosystem as well? How can they also set up initiatives to support their community to clean up plastic? So in the ocean, there's now 2 coral restoration sites, one 30 hectares and another one which is 7 hectares. There's allocated spaces for turtle nesting, and beach cleanups happen led by the women group often every month. And this is now fed into a Trash for Cash project, and it comes back into the different community groups that are part of this co-management area. So it's such an inspiration. It's some knowledge which I carry with me everywhere I go, and yeah, just proud to share that with you.
Sawa sawa. Shughuli ambazo tunafanya kwa BMU. The question. The question. Okay. Ni sasa. Shughuli ambazo BMU tunafanya katika bahari pale Takaungu, kumlinda kasa, kuna kusafisha ule mfuo kwa mzuri, na kuna shughuli zingine ambazo pia zinaendelea. Kuna kutoa zile, kuna chupa ambazo huwa zinatumika, huwa sengine huwa watu wengine huwa wanatupa kule kwa mfuo, huwa wakati mwingine tunazitoa. Yeah.
Okay, I'll say what he said in English. So in Takaungu, the BMU is involved in cleaning the beach because they also have a beach that is an important nesting site for sea turtles. And so they clean, remove the plastic waste, and make sure, and even out at sea, in the coastal waters, you find that there are plastics there as well. So they're involved in cleaning the beach and the ocean, rid it of plastics that would entangle marine turtles, or sometimes even marine turtles would mistake it for food and eat plastic bags. And they go ahead and recycle the plastic so that it remains out of the environment.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll hear one last thing from Esther as well with the Youth Biodiversity Network. I think you're working with BMUs as well, or with communities on the South Coast.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think this is where now the power of collaboration comes in, because all the initiatives that you're implementing, if they are not driven by the contributions of the communities, sometimes they will not work. And that is why communities are the key of the work that we do. And one of the key success stories that we have seen with the community that we have been working with is that BMUs have also been critical in ensuring that they can help address the issues of conflicting uses of the sea. It's not just addressing issues to do with overfishing, but also exploring other ways that the community can engage in to ensure that they can also give the ocean a chance to regenerate. And some of the activities that they have helped women to also engage in is like seaweed farming, because communities at the South Coast where we work along have been engaging in seaweed farming. And this helps to reduce the pressure that is there on these marine resources and ensuring that they can also provide an alternative livelihood for these communities.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great example, the one you just mentioned, of a new type of livelihood from the sea, seaweed farming, and how that's developing now with new ways to not just grow and sell the seaweed, but to make products and to add value, so that more of the income from the seaweed comes into the local communities themselves. So I think we turn towards the audience now and see, one, if there are any questions from the audience, but also from the panelists here. People have come because they are interested in acting in relation to the sea over here. So what would you recommend that people can do themselves to contribute to saving our seas or contribute to marine conservation? So if you have any ideas on that, I'll ask each of you to say one thing, and then perhaps open up for questions from the floor. So do you have any? What would you say?
So we can only manage what we know. So I would like to really push the audience to learn more about what's going around you, learn more about the sea, learn more about what organizations are doing. A festival like this is a wonderful way to get engaged, but be curious, research, watch documentaries, engage in different initiatives, because the more you know, the more we're able to do. And that's one of my recommendations.
From others, Justice or the others on the panel, what would you recommend people do? Perhaps you can pass this along.
Thank you so much. And given the fact that I sit as a young policymaker, and I always feel like policy is such a great equalizer. Because policy is driven by the work that we do as communities, as people on the ground, and effective policy is only driven by ensuring that the strategies that are going to be put in place can be context specific, like my colleague highlighted. They need to be context specific so that they can be addressing the needs and the priorities of the people. And so one of the things that I would challenge us to do, let us not feel small in terms of influencing policy, because we know how much a small thing in terms of policy can impact us as a nation. We already have experience with some of the things that are happening politically, and this doesn't negate the context that would be there in terms of the environmental sector. So let us do what we can to ensure that we can induce change in policy.
I believe that all of us, individually, as groups, community representatives, government representatives, we need to look at the ocean as an asset. Not just as, okay, it is a nice natural thing that we have and we enjoy things that come out of it, but we need to value it as an asset, the way you'd value your car or your house, and make sure that you put fuel in it for it to run, and clean it whenever it needs to be cleaned, and take it for maintenance. We need to do the same for the ocean, because David said earlier that we thought it is too big for us to impact it, but then we see that our actions are affecting it negatively, and we need to reverse that. And we can only do that when we ascribe it a value, the way something that you treasure, something that you own that you treasure. And in that way, we'll be able to actually make sure that the actions that we do, we sustain them and invest in them so that we have a healthy ocean.
Oh, thank you. Those are great responses. I was thinking in my mind we might hear things about, get engaged with a conservation project, get involved with the BMU, the activities that we've heard about here, the practical things, recycle waste, reduce pollution, which we all need to do, of course, but we heard about learn, know more about it, don't underestimate the importance of policy, engaging in government and getting the right decisions, and value, learn how to value things, so not just for money, but for the intrinsic values that they have, the importance that they have. So now I think let's hear from the audience. If you have any questions, we have a roving mic. Thank you very much.
The BMUs, we're acknowledging that they've been a success. What's your comment in their status, at the moment? And what's the plan? Do we want more of them? Do we want them to get bigger? And what's stopping us from that? Is it, local government, or is it policy? And the second thing is that we're acknowledging the success of Kiriwitu in so many areas, and I think that the cash for cash scenario. How do we take that further up and down the coastline?
So what may make you feel like there's no BMU in a place is because probably they're not able to do what they're supposed to do. Usually because of financial challenges and sometimes technical challenges, because it is a big responsibility that they have. Some of what they need to do needs training. And this is where the government and development partners and NGOs come in to support the type of trainings that BMUs need for them to be effective. We all know about Kiriwitu because of the good work that they do, but there's a lot of training that went into that. There's a lot of devotion, investment that went into getting it where it is today. And we need that for all the BMUs. Unfortunately, maybe just because of where a BMU is, they may not be able to get as much resources, and that has tended to pull some of them behind. But collaboration is important because, again, sometimes how you find NGOs working is that they end up not being very effective because they're replicating what another NGO has been doing. And so if we collaborate and are working we're looking at the same page so that we are able to distribute our resources along the coast, and in terms of training, in terms of support for some of the things that they need to buy for their work and so forth, we can make a change.
Gender split was generally within these BMUs, as well as potentially ages. Essentially, how involved are women within the BMUs? How involved are youth within them? And if there is a high number of women, what kind of systems were in place to allow that to happen, to have them in decision-making seats? And if not, what could we potentially do to change that balance?
Thank you. Great question on women in BMUs. If there's another question, somebody put your hand up.
Hawajihusishi kikamilifu kwa majukumu ya nyumbani sana sana.
Women participate in BMUs, and it is law that even in the leadership there has to be women, and other roles like taking care of the house, of the homes, may make it difficult for them to participate the way men participate, but there is that provision that women need to participate in BMUs. My experience has been that this is not uniform. You have places where they actively participate. You have places where you just have their names there to fill the numbers, to sort of tick a box. So it's varied. It depends on where you're looking at. But it is good that at least they're getting their voices out, and the structure allows for them to be heard. But there's need for more work to ensure that they are participating effectively.
Okay. Directly from the BMUs in answering that. And if I just give a little bit of an answer because in Cordia we do work with BMUs a lot. And there is a requirement in Kenyan law for, I think it's 30%, minimum 30% of any gender in a public organization. And these are public organizations. I got the thumb up from my co-director. And so women there must be provision for women to participate in BMUs. I was going to add one thing to some of the general comments that came about scaling up, and one of those is about leadership. And so one is that it takes, of course, the men and the leadership to provide the space and to recognize that there are many gendered roles in fisheries that we don't necessarily recognize, but they've always been there. And so making those more prominent and recognized, and including having the women representatives coming up into leadership and having a strong voice. And of course, then finding the women leaders that take that up and then bring a lot of the benefits that come from projects, like we've heard a lot from Kuruitu about the benefits of a lot of investment in one place. Often you may come in for one reason, such as coral reef conservation or supporting a BMU, but then you end up working with mangrove conservation, replanting, with women's groups who are taking around tourists and so on. And so there's a lot of additional benefits that can come. And the BMUs are really a very promising local institution that we can really need to build capacity and bring resources into. And the last thing I'll pick up on the values comment that Lillian made is that one of the biggest challenges we have in marine conservation is bringing enough money in to support managing the environment. We don't value it enough. We don't bring money into supporting the BMUs or the authorities in managing them well. Because we tend to cut costs everywhere and try and not to pay for that. So we really need to do that a lot more. I think we're coming to the end of our time, unless there is a last question from the floor. And, oh, yes, there is one more.
Able to work with the community, because the same resources that we have to conserve it is the same resources that they are using it for, maybe financial issues. So how are you guys like work with them and for them to get their, maybe to have their food at home or whatever? Yeah.
Okay, that's a tough question. How do we protect the fish and make a livelihood?
So I believe that incentives are a very, very key point in this. Seeing what's to gain and what's to lose, looking from both perspectives, because it's really, really important to look from all perspectives. And after doing that, seeing how you can be able to frame or create a system or program where incentives are mutually beneficial to both the community, to both the environment. And this can at times look like a circular model where or like for example, an ecotourism model has worked in some cases. In other times, it's seeing what businesses can you do around the conservation initiative led by the community with a very good and strong framework. And other times it can also look like a program where the incentive is by reaching a certain target of conservation or of bounce back of biodiversity, there are maybe some credits given back. So there's many different formulas, no size fits all. It really comes down to the context of where the community is, how they operate, what are the ocean state, what's their marine status like, what are their challenges, what are their struggles, but also then it comes down to also transparency and trust.
Thank you. Any other final words on that?
Yes, I think one of the issues that is forgotten most of the times is that we are not supposed to forget about the social aspect when it comes to conservation. I love a quote by I don't remember the name, but it says conservation is not just about biology, but also understanding people and why they make the choices that they do. Sometimes people make the choices because they don't have an alternative. And like my colleague has highlighted, the alternatives can be multifaceted, but in terms of how these are also going to be welcomed by these communities, you also need to really engage these communities and make sure that this is something that they are going to embrace. And also in terms of making the community understand why they really need to do that, because the value and also the impact that comes from the choices that they make lies within the knowledge that they are going to be having. And so empowering them with the knowledge is something that is critically important. And one of the issues that I always have a concern with is that we have a lot of people labeling fish as stocks. A stock is something that is meant to be finished. So if you talk about stocks, it means that we need to get rid of this because we need. It's going to come from somewhere else some other time. But if we have to personalize the resources that come from our ocean, refer to fish as populations just as ourselves, we are going to be in a position where we can also compel these communities to use these resources in a sustainable manner, thinking about the generations that are also going to be coming next.
Okay, lastly, I just like to observe that the question that he asks sometimes makes it feel like there is an us versus they, where us is conservationist and they is the local communities. But there's no such thing. You'll not succeed if you're looking at it that way. The communities themselves are the first conservationists. And sometimes when you sit with them, you find that they have ways in which they used to conserve the marine environment. Probably over the years with challenges like climate change, that has changed, but the aspect of conservation is there in every community.
All right, well, thank you very much, Lillian. I think we've come to the end of our time, and you brought it to where I was hoping to finish the panel discussion. So I think in the interest of time, I won't say anything else other than to thank my panelists for this very inspiring comments and observations. And I hope that we can all go out, save our seas, and really look to the community, or we are the community. We're all just different parts of the same community living by the sea. And how can we conserve it and use it well together? So thank you very much.